Rod, thank you for joining me. We've tried to do these videos with other clients of Aligned Influence, but we think it's really important to do this with our church clients. We think our churches really need to hear your voice in this, having moved through the Aligned Influence work. And so thank you for having us here at Grace Community Church here in Bartlesville.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time. So for all of those that are listening, that Rod and his team, Rod and his elders moved through the Aligned Influence work in the last year and a half or so, and now really operating that way. And so really want you to hear Rod's story as he talks about that transition, that story with Aligned Influence and the governance at Grace Community Church. So Rod, would you just give us some background on you and Grace Community Church?
Yeah, Grace Community Church was founded in 1995, and it was founded out of a Bible study. And that Bible study group realized sometime in 1994 that they were becoming a church. And so they incorporated and they formed a leadership team. I was called in to do the initial consultation with the church, which was a blast. I loved it. Loved the people, loved the concept. And they asked me to be the founding pastor. And so when I came 8 months later, the leadership team dissolved, and they said to me, we want you to pick the elders. And so I interviewed the leadership team, and I picked 6 elders out of the entire team. And for the first 7 years, it was great because our elders functioned like a staff. We had somebody over the kids ministry, somebody over the youth ministry, and somebody who was over small groups. I mean, it was amazing. And they weren't just like, this is my position. They were actually doing the work. And I loved it. And I realized it's very rare to have a church plant like that where the elders are functioning like a staff. But we were all the same age. Our kids were the same ages. It was a dream. As we grew, it became obvious that the elders could not continue to do that. And then we brought more elders on board, and not all of them had the capacity to do that. And so about 10 years into our work, we hired an executive pastor. And that executive pastor had come out of industry. He was a tremendous individual, had lots of capacity. And what happened over the next probably 18 months to 24 months is that the hands-on active work of the elder board became subsumed under the work of the executive pastor. And so the elders were thinking, what do we do? What are we doing? What are we doing? And so over the next, I would say, lengthy period of time, we, the elders, began to have kind of a crisis of identity. And even though we were doing well, we were making good decisions, as time went on, it really became a model where they were an advisory board for me. And we had a meeting where a new elder came on, and he said, so I guess really what we are is an advisory board for Rod. And instantly the lights went on, and I said, ooh, that's not good. That's not good at all. At the same time, we had a board retreat, and because I'm in my 60s, it's obvious I'm not going to be around for the next 50 years. And so, we need to make sure that that we have a board that is really functioning well in light of the obvious reality that somebody's going to succeed me at some point in time. And so it's at that point in time that I dialed up my very good friend, Bill Watkins, and Bill said, you got to talk to Ken. And you and I had a great series of conversations. I felt like we were writing our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and our founding documents, and I thought we got to get this right. We got to make sure we do this the right way. And Bill assured me, and in our conversations we connected, and you assured me we can do this. And so our experience has been just tremendous with Aligned Influence.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. So you talked about that you were thinking about how we're writing this Declaration of Independence or these policies. What actually happened, what did you actually accomplish in that work with aligned influence? Was it just writing policies, or was there something else going on?
Well, I think the thing that really attracted us to you in the beginning was the model that elders and boards do one thing and staff does another thing, and the two are complementary, and we need to show how they're complementary, and we need to build a culture of complementariness. Complementarity. And so that was a really helpful thing for us to think about, because I realized that coming to our elder board meetings, I felt pressure many Monday nights. Like, this is on me. I need to make sure this works. I need to make sure this hums. I need to make sure. I had read Death by Meeting by Pat Macllvaine, and you got to have these things hum. You got to have a great agenda. You want to bring people along in an exciting way. I felt pressure. And so Mondays were sometimes, I didn't realize this in the time, and I don't think I would have articulated this to our elders, but I felt pressure in preparation for Monday nights. And I felt like, as you've often said, the elders are like a staff, the staff is like a staff, we duplicate a lot of things. How do we make this work in a way where there's a way that we work synergistically in our own different niches? And that's what our work with you did. It was the model way before it was any of the policies.
That's great. Yeah, that's the goal, is thinking about this alignment and these roles and how they align, and then creating policies that support those. So what did you hope to accomplish when you called me? And what did you actually accomplish?
Well, what we hope to accomplish, I had a personal desire to make the elder board healthy. I do a lot of coaching inside the church. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, and I'm a Berkman consultant, and I do a lot of coaching. I love it. I do a lot inside the church. I do a lot outside the church. And one of the things that I often say to myself is, how do I bring the best of myself into this coaching relationship? How do I bring the best of myself into this elder board? I'm a leader, and I think about leadership. How do I bring the best of me into this setting?
Yeah.
And so, part of what I was thinking, is how do I bring the best of me on the board? And that's what that was my impulse.
And what did you actually accomplish?
What we actually accomplished was, in my sense, some integrity for me, which was really important. I wanted to make sure that I was a really outstanding leader of staff and elders. So it was an integrity thing for me. The other thing we actually accomplished was an identity for the board, so that the board, and it's taken some time. It's taken some time.
Sure.
It's like you're going into marriage counseling, and there's a new culture forming, but it takes a while. We had a new culture that was forming on the board that I think the board really has grasped onto now. I wanted integrity for me. I wanted a sense of identity for the board, and I also wanted the staff to see that I was leading the board with a plan. Also, I wanted a healthy board structure because of the inevitable reality of succession. And one of the things that I realized that responsible senior pastors do is they have an emergency succession plan. Most churches do not have that, and so the pastors get into crisis. And most churches don't have a senior pastor succession plan. I always thought it was, when you're, 2 months away from leaving. I'm being kind of facetious about that, but through my relationships with various different pastor succession planning firms, I have realized that these days it's important, if it's going to be 10 years from now, you have a plan. If it's going to be 15 years from now, you have a plan. If it's 5 years from now, you have a plan.
Yeah.
Healthy organizations wisely plan for the obvious succession of the principal in the organization. And that was important for me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about that, and then the emergency succession plan that comes out of what Aligned Influence does is that, and what happens if something terrible happens.
Yeah.
And you lose that person's leadership.
Yep.
How are you going forward? And now you have that as well, which
Yep.
is great. So what did you learn through the process with Aligned Influence that you didn't know before?
I learned a lot that I did not know. I didn't know that I knew.
Oh.
And so, for instance, with Aligned Influence, the paradigm for the board is direct, protect, enable.
Mm-hmm.
For the staff, it's lead, manage, accomplish.
Yeah.
So with the direct, protect, enable, I wanted some guarantees that in the event that I leave, that the values that I have invested, 27 years into, will be sustained.
They were not just in you, they were in the board as well.
Right. And not just in the current board, but in the board as it might be during that time.
Yeah.
And so, the direct material gave me the opportunity to say, what values have I invested into this place for 27 years? And how can I capture those in a document that is clear to me, clear to the elders, and will be clear to a future iteration of this board? That was a lot of fun.
And that it actually becomes something that the elders own then, not just you,
Right.
that then moves in something that they manage over the years.
Right, and the elders, I'm fortunate to have elders who are highly respectful of the fact that I've invested, a lot of my time into the creation of these values. I mean, one of the important values for us was the value of grace and truth. Mm. And we've had a lot of people come into our church because we have so many recovery type ministries. Mm. We have a lot of people come into our church who've been broken by, sadly, other faith-based organizations. And so they want to know, am I coming into an atmosphere where there may be judgmentalism? Mm. And so we want to incorporate that into the direct policies and talk about the importance of grace and truth, that we accept people no matter where they are right now. Unconditionally, we love them right where they are right now. But because of our truth value, that we want to bring them into a truth-filled relationship with Christ in a reasonable time period. And we talk about the reality of grace plus truth plus time. Yeah. When Jesus was interacting with the woman at the well, he didn't blast her right away. There was grace plus truth in the atmosphere of enough time for her to process what Jesus was saying. Yeah. And so to capture those in the direct documents was just great, great for me.
Yeah, great process. I remember the discussions. They were really rich, deep discussions that everybody was able to, at the end of that point, to and say, yes, that's the direction we're going.
Yep.
Everybody agreeing with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel very confident that, if there's an emergency succession that has to take place, okay, we've got the documents in the direct policies that sustain those values. Yeah. And so that's really good.
Yeah. So when you think about speaking to other churches, and I know you have opportunity where you're speaking to other churches and other pastors around the country all the time, what would you say to them that you learned in this process and what they ought to hear about this process? Because a lot of churches are asking the same question.
Yeah.
Or should be. They haven't. If they're not, they should be asking the same question.
Well, what I hear is I hear a lot of board pain. I hear a lot of board pain from the staff toward the board, from the senior pastor toward the board, from the board toward the senior pastor, from the board toward the staff. And I hear a lot of pain. And if there's not pain, I hear a lot of ambivalence. And if there's not ambivalence, I hear a lot of, it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And I think what I've learned is it doesn't have to be that way. If you set up a structure that is objective and clear, then it creates a space where subjective feelings of warm reciprocity can take place. And so we had a conversation where recently where we went back to the direct, protect, enable documents, And as we were looking at the documents, one of the elders said, well, wait a second, here's how we operate. This is what we said. This is how we said we operated.
It made a difference.
It made a difference. And then all of us were brought into alignment with what we had agreed and said, okay, so if that's the case, what do we need to do right now? But it was done in a very warm and respectful way, because senior pastor and board had hashed this out together in a retreat that you led very well. And so we were going back to these founding documents. And it's similar to, when I work with a couple and I say, it's important that you have a couple's constitution at this point in your marriage. And a husband and wife can say, we've agreed to this. And so, if we're going to be people of integrity, let's go by this agreement. And that's made made a big difference. And when I use the term warm reciprocity, I feel like the warm reciprocity has been the outflow of the objective nature of the direct, protect, enable documents. And one of the things you asked that I don't think I answered had to do with the protect documents. I was a little surprised when we first got into the protect documents that it said, senior pastor shall not fail to do X. And as I read through those things, what I realized was, I failed to do X. and that X is a really good thing to do, because I tend to be a very trusting person. I tend to be a very grace-oriented person. I tend to develop strong leadership relationships with people. But what I realized in the senior pastor shall not fail to do, there's some things that were gaps. And if those gaps had been violated, I would not have been a good leader. And some of those were in the area of HR. What I find is many churches are not good at being up to date with HR policies in this current generation. And many people who leave faith-based organizations get hurt because the board, the leader, in this case senior pastor, did not handle HR issues well. And so those protect aspects of the document made me realize, if I'm going to be a good leader, I've got to tune these up.
Yeah.
And so what we found was, when we had these documents and when our vendors saw the documents, like the people who do our HR software, the people who do our accounting software, when they saw those, they said, we are so glad that you have these. This gives us a lot of trust in working with you as an organization. And by the way, not many churches have these. And that was eye-opening.
Yeah. Actually, that leads to another great question, and that is that the church, the Big C church, churches, I think anybody that has been in those or been leader in those knows that the church right now is struggling with this idea of governance.
Yes.
And what should governance look like? What do you think you've learned about governance and governance of the church specifically through this process?
Well, as a pastor, I think the thing that I have learned is that the governance passages in Titus, Timothy, and in 1 Peter, and other areas as well, they're modeled obviously in the book of Acts, Acts 20 and so on, that those need to be interpreted in a wise way hermeneutically. I've had people all over the map where people who have been in a hierarchical form of leadership, where there's been bishops and archbishops and deacons and very institutional, they've said, Bible teaches this, we have to do it this way. And others who take a congregational approach have said, Bible teaches this, we got to do it this way. And people who take more of an elder-ruled approach, no, the Bible does it this way. And as you and I have talked about, people who take kind of a radical, got to do it first century way, that's the only way that's legitimate. They've said, no, got to do it this way. And I think what I've learned as I've restudied those passages is that, excuse me, is that those passages give us the function of what the leader is to be, what the board is to be. And the function is that we need to lead skillfully, with integrity, wisely on the basis of grace and truth. That's the function. But the form of that can shift with the culture. So the first century did not have HR issues that they had to deal with, and so wisdom would suggest that we contextualize the enduring eternal principles from God's Word. We contextualize what is enduring and permanent into what is culturally shifting. And so that's been a big takeaway for me, because I hear people who kind of take this radical approach that now it's it's got to be denominational and it's got to be done this way. And others who say the exact opposite, that no, it's got to be small house churches, and this is what the Bible teaches. And I'm seeing things differently. That the function has got to be this very enduring core function, but the form can shift and change with the culture, which makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah, really makes sense. So take people through the experience actually with Aligned Influence. You talked about sort of the work up to this point, and you made reference to a retreat. So just give people an insight into what your perception was of the experience with Aligned Influence. How did that work?
Yeah, so I took your material, and because I love to edit and write, and I wanted our elders to see it in a form that they're used to seeing from me. That also gave me the opportunity to include some things biblically that I knew they would feel really comfortable with. The function side that we had talked about. And so I worked on that and came up with a document: direct, protect, enable. We had a statement of faith in there. We had our bylaws in there. We had our corporate information in there. It was a package that I then presented to them. And they were able to then go, okay, this is ours. We can own this now. And I've really appreciated the fact that you gave us the raw materials that we need and gave us the freedom to be able to tailor those exactly to what our church needed. And because I had the ability to put that into a form that really fit our church, I think our elders really own this. And they've really latched onto this idea that these are our documents. And if we need to change these, we can.
Yeah.
And there have been a couple of things that we have changed very profitably, very much along the lines that you've encouraged us about, that if you see something in here that you as a board need to update, that's what this process does.
Yeah.
And so we've done that.
Yeah, in fact, you talked about the process, because often when I go into a church or an organization, there's been some previous work that's been done. Sometimes it's a booklet that's sitting on a shelf, and that's what we did, but that's never pulled off the shelf since then. One of the things we talk about, we create this calendar of work. Can you talk a little bit about that and this calendar and how that calendar drives your work of this?
Well, as you and I both know, you can create a vision statement and a mission statement and a strategy statement, and you get it all and you're super excited about it, and it goes in the desk drawer and you never see it again. And what is genius about what you've done with Aligned Influence is that you've got the documents, but now with the calendar, you've got a way of doing things on a regular basis that keep you up to date with what you say you're going to do. And so when you and I got on a Zoom call and we went through the calendar, I started seeing okay, this is what our natural calendar is. Let's stick this in May, for instance, and this is what we do in October. And so then what we do in our elder meetings is we take that component of the direct, protect, enable documents, and we weave that into the regular elder meeting, and we work on that. And so one of the things we worked on recently, which is in the calendar, is statement of faith. Is this still where we want to be? Mm-hmm. And when I first thought about that, I thought, wait, we've already established this. Why is this an important board function? And what I realized is we had some new elders who had not seen this. They saw it when they came on the board, but they were just saying, yes, 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 yep, I sent to the whole thing. What they said was, well, let's press into this. You know, what do we mean here? What do we mean here? Why did you include that in there when you did? And so that was an opportunity for me to do some leading, as well as other elders who've been on board for a long time to do some leading and give some context as well.
Yeah, to keep it fresh and to keep, I think that's really interesting, to have new elders coming on and to have them be able to own this document as well through this annual set of working through this. I think.
Well, and at one point, in your direct, protect, enable documents, which we affectionately call our DPE documents, at one point you talk about taking a fresh look at every year at the bylaws. And so we're looking at the bylaws, and one of our new elders says, we're not doing this. and everybody else on the board said, you're right, we're not doing this. And so it gave me an opportunity to say, okay, let me get with our staff, and let's work a system into what we do so that we are doing it. Yeah. And I'll report back to you on it.
Fantastic. The process is working.
It is. It's working. Yeah. That's great.
That's great. So were there surprises along the way?
Well, the surprise that I mentioned before is that there were some things that I was not doing as a leader who should be protecting our staff. That I mean, I was doing them, but not doing them in a systematic, orderly, conscious way, and that needed to be done. That surprised me. I think the other thing that surprised me was the way in the direct, protect, enable documents and the enable side, the elders have a responsibility to look at the stakeholders in the community. And who do we serve outside the walls of our church? And so what we realized was we have two ministries in our church that bring a lot of outsiders in. Now those outsiders are connected with agencies within our community. So for instance, with our recovery ministry, we have attorneys who send people our way. We have counselors who send people our way. We have city agencies who send people our way. So what is our relationship with those attorneys, those faith-based organizations, those city agencies? Do we know the people who are leading these? Do the elders know them? And it turns out that some of the elders do know them, have had a relationship with them, and it's warm, it's collaborative. So now we're being much more intelligent and intentional with how we deal with outside agencies within our community.
Interesting.
We've also had somebody in our church who said, I really have a strong conviction that Grace Community Church can make a difference in our community if. And then he presented a plan. Well, it turns out that the person who could help us engineer that plan is somebody who we know very well. And so that intelligent understanding about who do we know in the community who can be a resource to us, we would not have known that had we not gone through this process.
Yeah, about those elders, the overseers being outward focused and engaging in the That's fantastic. So you've talked about this a lot, but let me just narrow down on it. What do you think the most positive benefits of this work have been for you?
Well, for me, it's integrity. It's leadership integrity. That's been the biggest part of it.
So can you say some more about that? When you say leadership integrity, how does this process lead to that integrity?
So, as a leader, who's been here for 27 years. I want to lead well. And so I have, during the pandemic, when everything was chaotic, I hired a coach, and I said to myself, what are my leadership values, and how do I bring those leadership values to bear in a very chaotic period of U.S. history that is, world history, that is impacting our church during the season.
Yeah.
And I came out with 4 values, and I didn't mean for them to start with the word L. It seems sort of, it's alliteration, and pastors are known for abusing alliteration, but it's just naturally how they came out, and they were love, learn, lead, legacy. And so during the pandemic, I said, and by the way, our church flourished and thrived during the pandemic by God's grace, and by the fact that the trials that we were going through really brought fresh leadership to bear. But I realized, as a leader who's, now in his 60s, it seems odd for me to say that because I don't feel that, and who wants to lead well during a crisis, I want to know with precision what those values are, and then how to bring those values to bear into a leadership situation. And so part of my desire to lead well with integrity is, how do I have transferable documents that empower me to know that my legacy will endure? And so it's leadership integrity is leadership that endures past me. I had a friend who was a pastor who said, I've been to this church for 33 years and I will die in the pulpit. And when I heard him say that, I thought, that's not good leadership. Because what are people going to do? You're going to die in the pulpit. They're going to, rush up to you on a Sunday morning. And you're going to die, and you've not planned for your emergency succession. You've not planned for your senior pastor succession, and this thing that you put your time and effort into is going to flounder for who knows how long. And that's just not. I like this guy a lot. He's an awesome guy, but that's just not good leadership.
I love the description of the leadership integrity, because it's leading with integrity that is focusing outside of just what's good for you. It's what's good for the church and how the whole church is moving forward.
And I'm glad you said it that way, because I know a lot of people who are fear-based leaders that, okay, I need to stay in control of this thing. I need to make sure that I have a salary. I need to make sure that that I'm doing okay. And so they want to hold on to this thing. And I get that, I understand that, but that obviously is not leadership integrity. Nor is it leadership integrity to be highly passive and go, well, God's gonna provide, and He will. But maybe also, God wants you to plan, and maybe He wants His provision to happen through your wise planning. And that's where my focus on leadership integrity was.
That's great. So, how has this process impacted your ability to be successful as a church?
Well, for starters, it's given me a voice to be able to articulate to our congregation how our elders operate and how great our elders are. So, we get to choose the kind of persona we bring into elder meetings, right? We can choose that. We can choose to be threatened and fearful. We can choose to be abundant and gracious. We can choose to lead well. And this helps me lead our elders well. But then it also, on a Sunday morning, allows me to say, you know what, I love our elders. And our elders are leading exceptionally well. So this process has allowed me to say that with a lot of integrity, knowing that the direct, protect, enable part of their role empowers the staff to lead, manage, and accomplish with excellence. And so I find myself more apt on a Sunday morning to say, we got a great set of elders, and they're doing a fantastic job. And just this last week when we dedicated our new section of our building, I was able to say, our elders made a series of decisions during the pandemic that were fantastic decisions, and I'm really proud of them. And I'm really proud of how we tuned up our leadership during this time, and so that resonates with people, and they just feel a sense of confidence, like, hey, great. It's like a kid knowing, Mom and Dad are doing great in their marriage.
Yeah.
We feel good, Mom and Dad are doing great in their marriage.
Yeah.
Well, if staff and elders are doing great in their relationship, people feel a sense of, okay, we're good.
What do you think happens next? What can you look forward to now that you have this in place?
That's a great question. So I would say that the main thing is me enjoying leadership. So we've got a great executive pastor, which I'm very thankful for. And I am trying to be in a situation where I speak 36 times a year, not 52, obviously, or 50, but to spread the leadership around. We have, by God's grace, have raised up a really good staff, and I'm trying to give them more leadership opportunities, more leadership horsepower, and I think the structure with Direct, Protect, Enable, Lead, Manage, Accomplish gives me the confidence that as I give them more leadership horsepower, that they are going to work really well on this playing field. Without the structure, it's like you don't have a playing field. Are we in a tennis court? Are we in a baseball diamond? Are we on a football stadium? Is it a curling rink? What do we have? What do we have? Because the rules are different, Yeah. And the Direct, Protect, Enable documents with the Lead, Manage, Accomplish mindset gives us a particular playing field. And we know what that playing field is. We know what the rules. It's not baseball. It's football. And we know how to operate in that playing field. So that gives me the confidence as a leader to be able to say, why don't you take that leadership role? Why don't you take that role? And that's great for me as a leader because leaders should be delegating. Leaders should be bringing up other people. It's great for me as a human being because it gives me margin in my life that allows me to be more present as a pastor. I've been in seasons of my ministry where I've not been very present because I know all these things that have to take place. And I'm thinking, about the next 15 things in my mind, and so somebody's in front of me, and I'm not present. Well, that's not a good thing, And so if I'm going to be a healthy senior pastor, I need to be present, and I can be more present in a more godly way with this structure in place than if the structure is not in place, and I'm working hard to hold everything.
Trying to invent it as you go.
Yeah.
Well, Rod, thank you so much for taking time. I think other pastors and church leaders are going to really benefit from your experience and your words. And I just value you, and I value what you're doing in this church and the Big C Church all around the world. I think your voice is going to echo to a lot of pastors. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. And I will say one more thing. You asked what I was looking forward to. And one of the things I'm looking forward to, our initial consultation was great. And your ongoing consultation, which is staying aligned, your ongoing coaching, that has proved very helpful as well. It was helpful to the moderator of our elder board.
That's great.
And what I appreciate about your coaching is that when we bring on a new moderator, well, he's already on our board, we'll have to figure out who that is, but when our new moderator comes on, your coaching of him will be instrumental in us maintaining and growing in the process that you've trained us in.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Yeah, good.